Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Portman Road on a glorious day here in Suffolk. I am Michael Bailey. I am strictly neutral here for this Derby. Don't laugh. For this Derby Day preview. Me and Paddy have travelled all the way south from sunny Norwich as well to discuss the Derby, forthcoming East Anglian fun and games with Chief Ipswich Town writer Stuart Watson, and as I said, Chief Norwich City writer Paddy Davitt is here too. We're going to discuss all the build-up to the big one, with Ipswich Town hosting Norwich City, of course, on Sunday. You have free reign on questions too, so make sure you get your questions and comments in, and I'll try and keep track of those as we go along. Gentlemen, lovely to see you. How are we feeling? All good? All well? Enjoy the weekend, Stuart?
Yeah. We're a decent trip up to Bramall Lane and back. So. All roads lead to the action here on Sunday lunchtime now, don't they?
They do indeed. We've managed to find a spot where the wind isn't too strong, at least. Paddy, enjoying being down here?
Well, Mr. Watson's played a blinder here to get us into. Struggle. I'm not going to use the word enemy territory, but I've just used it, haven't I? But it's a deal quieter than it will be come midday Sunday, particularly over there behind you, Michael, where the Norwich support will be in fine voice, I'm sure. I'm looking forward to this one, because for me, I think Ipswich have got a great chance, really, and that's not a slight on Norwich, it's just because of the transition. I was thinking about it on the drive over. Probably of the team who played Saturday against Hull, there's only Ivo Pinto for me, who was in and around the 11 last season, so that underlines scale, and then you add on another layer in terms of new coach, sporting director. So there's a few more imponderables from the Norwich side of the fence for me, and I know Ipswich haven't quite been able to maintain that unbelievably brilliant start to the season they had, but I would imagine they would fancy it. And so I think this is a really intriguing derby for me.
Brilliant. You've teed it up nicely, because I wanted to get how you feel your respective sides are getting on. Stuart, how about Ipswich?
Yeah, I think Paddy's hit the nail on the head there. Despite Ipswich's rough form of late, it's six defeats in 8 all competitions now, 5 in 7 in the league. I don't think the performances have been as bad as that suggests. I didn't think the performances were as good as the wins at the start of the season suggested either, to be honest. They have progressed from last season. That's not saying a great deal. It was such a miserable, disappointing season, 16th in the league, but it was the style of football and just so many drab, forgettable games, and they've moved on from that. It's more entertaining. They're among the league's leading goal scorers. They've definitely got a goal threat about them now, which I think is key and crucial for derby matches. A little bit shaky at the back. That's not been helped by injuries. So when you've got a team that's scoring goals and conceding goals, that also adds an extra element of excitement heading into a fixture like this. Yeah,
what's the atmosphere going to be amongst the fans? Because it has been a while since they've beaten Norwich. It's 2009, I think, and that's a fair old run. And as Paddy touched on, we'll talk about the Norwich fans in a bit. Maybe a little bit wary that these runs do come to an end at some point. How about the guys at Ipswich?
Yeah, I think it's the recent run of form has perhaps taken a little bit of the edge off of the belief going into this. I think I think going back 2 years, going into those playoff games, realistically, even the most dyed-in-the-wool Ipswich fan deep down knew that there was probably a gap in class when you looked at that Norwich team and you looked at a sort of an Ipswich squad that was punching above its weight big time at that time. I think that gap has narrowed in recent years. Paddy sort of said it's a Norwich side in transition. The parachute payments are running out at the end of this season. Ipswich are still a typical Mick McCarthy side that probably is, it's a better team than a collection of individuals, but they've got some players in form. I think McGoldrick's playing some of the best football of his career at the moment. They've got, as I say, they've got goals in them, so this could be a closer affair than we've had for a long time.
And as we mentioned before, the Norwich fans, Pad, how do we see that? Because they're quite aware of this run that they're on against Ipswich. It tends to come up, before the fixture lists come out and all sorts.
Yeah, well, it's your naturally pessimistic outlook that every football fan, whatever their persuasion, would have, i.e. this run has to end. I think it's 8 fixtures going back to 2009. For me, I think if we'd have had this fixture in the midst of the first 5-6 weeks of the campaign, when anybody following Norwich knows it was quite troubling, really, because you couldn't see any progression from a new set of players, a new head coach, a new philosophy, trying to bring this identity, so we know what a Norwich side is all about under Daniel Farke, and there was some couple of heavy defeats at Villa and Millwall, and it was the manner of the defeats, just the goals they were conceding, that really made you fearful about what the season might hold. But then from that point on, 8 games unbeaten going into Sunday. They've gone to some really difficult places. Sheffield United, Stuart was there at the weekend, he would know that's a tough place, very intimidating place it was that day, without going back into chapter and verse what happened when Norwich went there, Middlesbrough away midweek, possibly the biggest spenders of all the teams in the division over the summer, and they've ground out a win there. They've won at Reading, that's another traditionally difficult place to go. And even Saturday just gone, to go to the 96th minute and keep going, and finally you get an equaliser just to maintain this run. I think there's got to be a genuine belief that, aside from the pessimism, because Norwich have been so dominant in this fixture since 2009, that they feel they can probably continue this, because we've now seen evidence under Daniel Farke and this group of players that, and we know that they'll come here, McCarthy will have Ipswich up and at them, they'll try and get the crowd behind them. It can be quite a difficult place. I mean, Stuart's referenced the playoff games, that you'll take some beating for that first leg atmosphere in 2:15. This place was jumping that day, and Norwich managed to grind out a result that day, and I just feel that if, and they will do, this group of Norwich players come under pressure here Sunday, they've shown now that they can handle that and grind out a result. So I think, a long-winded way to answer it, Michael, I think the Norwich fans will feel that, okay, yeah, there is this long run and all good things come to an end, but I think they would feel that probably wouldn't be the Sunday. But as I say, I'll go back to what I said right at the start. I think this is a very, very even game now, and probably Ipswich's best chance to end that run since 2009 for me.
And there we go. And I mean, we've also had the sort of pre-match comments, the brick batting. Is that the term? That's not the right term, is it? But all the sparring beforehand has kicked off, probably by Nelson Oliveira's comments predominantly, and you'll be able to catch those on all the websites. Stuart, how have they gone down here?
Well, it's lit the blue touch paper, hasn't it? A week to go. Reminds me of Fabian Wilness going back many years. I think that was after the game, where he sort of made sort of similar comments, disparaging comments about Norwich that weren't forgotten for some time. It's an interesting one. I've been trying to speak to a few sort of Ipswich Town club legends who are very quick to sort of knock down the sort of, I think the bigger club line was the one that kind of stuck out for Ipswich fans the most, because of for all Norwich's bragging rights in recent years, both in this fixture and time in the Premier League. We all know that the histories don't match up at all, do they, with Sir Alf Ramsey? This stand and that stand there, named after two former England managers in Alf Ramsey and Bobby Robson and all the rest of it. It's a debate that football fans have up and down the country, isn't it? But it's certainly added an extra bit of spice going into it, for sure.
It certainly has, hasn't it, Pad? And I mean, I guess from a Norwich perspective, is it good that Nelson has come out with those comments, or would you rather have kept them in maybe until after the game?
I think you probably, if you had a choice and you're Daniel Farke, you don't really want to be seeing headlines of that nature, because, as I say, if this game is going to be very evenly contested and you're looking for little fine margins that could tip it, I'm sure McCarthy will be made aware, if he's not already, of those comments, and more importantly his players will. So any extra motivation is a bad thing from Norwich's perspective. And it's funny, when I saw those quotes, it took me back to, I was covering when Norwich were in League One and they played Swindon, and Danny Wilson, the former Swindon manager, he more or less did something similar in the sense that a week or so before that fixture he did some media and more or less questioning whether Norwich coming down to the third tier for the first time in 50 years, whether they could handle it, whether they could go to the small backwaters and dig out results. And then I was told by somebody who's still at Carrow Road now, so I've no reason to doubt him, that Paul Lambert had those comments up around a training ground pretty much for the previous week leading up to the game, and then Norwich went out and won the game. So, as I say, I think McCarthy, because we all know he's a very experienced streetwise operator, if he's going to use those comments, then that's, to me, a negative from the Norwich point of view. But as I said, I don't think in the final analysis it's going to make it any more difficult, really. It just it's good for us in the media that it starts the week off with a bang, doesn't it?
It does indeed. Mick will post those on the dressing room always.
Yeah, I mean, I think Mick McCarthy's sole motivation, or prime motivation, as he always reminds us, is proving people wrong, whether that's his own critics or people that write off his club, and so he'll certainly be using those as extra motivation this week. I think from an Ipswich point of view, I think it's great. I think you're right. I think keep those in house until after a game. Don't provide the opposition with any more motivation than they need.
Let's have a quick talk about the managers, shall we? Stuart, Mick McCarthy, how is his position here at the club at the moment? Because it's been a difficult time for him at times. Likewise, he's the longest serving Championship manager, isn't he?
Yeah, not only the longest serving Championship manager, but will be among the top, I think, 5 in the entire 92 English football clubs, coming up for 5 years next month. 5 years at Ipswich Town, a long time, a very durable manager, and I think a lot of the traits that perhaps rub people up the wrong way, very pragmatic, very very straight talking, they are probably the things that have made him such a durable football manager, that have got him through tough times in football. And this is where we're at now. 5 years at Ipswich. I think we've seen and heard everything that there is to see from Mick, like it or not. He's done a remarkable job on a budget, we have to say. You look at, it's been up until this summer, frees, loans, swaps. So to have had them, 6th and then 7th was very much punching above their weight. But the last season was a massive disappointment, and there's no getting away from that. 16th, as I touched on in the first part of this video, it wasn't just the position in the table. It was the distinct lack of entertainment value here, and then perhaps the negative nature of the team selections and tactics and all that sort of stuff came under the microscope big time last season. The atmosphere inside here turned pretty toxic at times. They went through their whole array of chants aimed at both the owner, who has also come under criticism for the level of investment. So that's where we're at. Mick's in the final year of his contract now. He himself said in the summer that he badly needed to freshen up the squad. He's done that. He knew that he needed a fast start to win back hearts and minds, as he said. They had that fast start, but there was always going to be a feeling of apathy and disillusionment just sort of bubbling under the surface, and perhaps this recent run of form, certainly 6 defeats from 8, has just kind of brought a little bit of that to the surface, and it just feels like these next few games, and especially with it being Norwich on Sunday, could go a long way to either going back to the mood of last season, or finally kind of burying that for good and moving on.
I mean, there is a little element of that bubbling under the surface at Norwich to a degree, but they're the flip side, aren't they? Paddy, Daniel Farke's only been there a few months, and it's a wholesale changes and completely different to someone who's established in the Championship.
Yeah, hugely. I think what I was saying in part one was when he was an unknown and there was no visible signs. Yes, okay, it was so early. It was very unfair, probably, but there were. My timeline was more than one Norwich fan of Norwich made a mistake here. Is this guy out of his depth? We all know his backstory now from a Norwich perspective. Plucked from Borussia Dortmund's second team, basically the fourth tier of German football, and first foray into senior management / first foray into English management, and there was a lot of imponderables there around this guy. And as I say, when you're going and seeing what they served up at Villa and Millwall, and there wasn't a lot of light at the end of that particular tunnel. So it's a huge testament to him that he's emerged from that, and now he looks like he gets it. He looks like he's got his message across to his players. And as I said earlier, when you go to Middlesbrough, you win. When you go to Sheffield United, you win. Reading, you grind out points like they did in the manner they did against Hull. That is a group of players who are playing for that manager, who understand what he's trying to get across. And it also, in terms of the manager, it shows that he understands, because basically what he did is up to that point when things weren't going quite so well, they went into the first international break, they emerged from it, and he basically made a tactical change in terms of his midfield, where he's now got 2 in front of the back 4. He brought Alex Tete back in, one of the old stalwarts, a combative type of midfielder, perhaps not the most technically refined midfielder, but he was badly needed because they were too open, they were too easy to play against. And then from that point, they've never looked back, really. So to me, that shows a manager who's not wedded to this philosophy that we must play in one set way, and I'm not going to change for love nor money. He could see it wasn't working. He was willing to tweak it. He was willing to change personnel, and he's reaped the benefits so far. So I think Daniel Farke so far, if you were rating him out of 10, I think you'd have to say he's 7 going on 8 at the minute, because he's proving that he can put a team on the pitch, you can get results in the Championship. Nobody's saying that Norwich are playing fluently, and then there is an issue at home in terms of scoring goals. But as I say, because this is still very early and it's a work in progress, you have to say the way he's recovered from a very testing start is testament to him. And I think it looks like an astute signing at this point from the football club.
In terms of players, two general questions really, I suppose. Stuart, I'll ask you first. The one that you feel will really shine for Ipswich in a derby atmosphere, and then who you're maybe more wary of in a Norwich shirt.
Well, for a derby atmosphere, I think everyone's fingers crossed that Joe Garner will be fit. Signed him from Rangers in the summer for around 750,000, ex-Preston man. Question marks over his goal scoring record at Championship level. He's been an excellent League One player for Preston, but boy did he hit the ground running, and he's become a bit of a fan's favourite straight away with his all-action, physical, real wind-up merchant of a striker. He's one that if he's on the opposition team you absolutely hate him and detest him, and if he's on your team you love him. And he was a big miss on Saturday. He missed his first game with a knee injury. He's due to have a scan today. We don't know what the results on that are yet, but he'd be the one that I think a derby day atmosphere would be really suited to. So if he can be fit, he'd make a big difference.
Paddy, it sounds similar to Nelson Oliveira in a way. You can wind things up. I guess can also have a temperament where you have to sort of close your eyes and hope for the best at times. But
yeah, but I mean, there's no doubt in the guy Nelson's talent. I think if you're being harsh, it's probably the temperament side of things that is why he's playing in the Championship. Because I think in ability, I mean, a couple of international breaks ago, he's in the Portugal squad with the likes of Ronaldo and Andre Silva and top players. European champions, lest we forget. So ability-wise, he's too good for this league, but there is something in his character, and we've seen it. Maybe we've seen it in the last few days off the pitch. We've seen it on the pitch. That episode at Fulham on the opening day where he didn't start the game and he was brought on. He got an equaliser and then decided to have it out with his manager. Apologised in the aftermath. Knew he'd overstepped the mark, but there was a game last season, wasn't there, where he reacted at Rotherham and got himself sent off, and the team were down to 10 men. So that's again all music to McCarthy's ears. I'm sure his centre backs will be being told to noise him up, as the terminology might be. But if he keeps his head and he's just fully focused in the job in hand, then he can decide this game. He could decide any game in the Championship because he's that good. And you just hope, as I say, you can keep the intensity under wraps to a degree, and we just see the ability, because his ability is second to none in this league.
I mean, arguably they were two quite tepid affairs, weren't they, derbies last year? Maybe in terms of the season before, 2 seasons before, we were a little bit spoiled, but it does sound like we've got a few ingredients that could make it a bit spicy on Sunday.
Plenty of subplots, isn't there? Of course, we've got Angus Gunn in goal. I'm sure Town fans will be reminding him of the old man's air kick a few years ago, so a little subplot there. Two feisty, fiery strikers that might be short fuses waiting to happen there. So plenty of subplots here, and hopefully it all adds to an exciting day.
And in terms of the Norwich players, you're maybe, I don't know if wary of as well, but maybe keen to see. I mean, do you look at it and go, "Well, this is a new look squad"?
Yeah, been looking through obviously once Saturday's game was out of the way, I started looking at the Norwich team, and as Paddy touched upon in one of our earlier chats, there's not many players left from previous regime, so I can't really comment on a whole load of them. I know speaking to Paddy a few weeks ago, saying Tribal and midfield has made a big difference, but I have to say, and I'm not being too disrespectful, and it may come back to bite me, it's not a team that strikes fear into me, perhaps the way that a team of a couple of years ago did when you looked at Redmond and Howson and Johnson and players like that. It's hard for me to say because I haven't seen a few of these German lads that have come in and done well by all accounts. I think Maddison, from when I've seen him, is obviously a very talented young player. I don't know if Murphy's going to be fit for you guys, but there's no getting away from it. You've got an injury list. Tetty, you've said it, is a key man, and he's out at the moment. Pritchard, it was obviously the main creative spark. He's out. We know all about Cameron Jerome. I think he's always a handful. Houlihan obviously getting on in years, but he seems to always be the man for a derby occasion, doesn't he? So whether he comes on and has something to say, I'm sure he'd be one that Town fans are wary of.
There's been a few changes down at Town as well, haven't there, Pad? Have you been keeping half an eye on it?
No, well, like Stuart says, it's difficult until you get round to this fixture to actually throw any focus on, the team over the road, as it were. But I mean, the lad who stood out for me, certainly in the early part of the season, was Waghorn. I mean, he looks a very good signing. And I remember him ripping it up for Leicester at Carrow Road in the dim and distant past. Real powerhouse of a forward player, and I would imagine he wouldn't be too shy if there was there's a bit of a feisty element to the derby. I wouldn't have thought he would take a backward step. So I've always thought he's basically one of those lads who's on the pitch, he makes something happen, and he will take some careful watching. I mean, I'll be interested to ask Stuart. I mean, you said there that they're playing a bit more football, under McCarthy now. So you don't think it'll, because in recent times down here, it's been very much bypass the midfield and try and get it long. And obviously you had Murphy at that point and play off him. I mean, it's a bit more through the thirds, would you say?
Yeah, listen, it's not. We're not at Barcelona football level yet, but it's an improvement. I think you'll be surprised as they're not the long ball merchants that perhaps they were, like you say, with Murphy, the focal point of a few years ago. Injuries have forced Mick's hand in terms of the way he's playing. They've had a lot of centre-backs and central midfielders injured, so it's kind of forced him to play all of his attacking players in one hit. He's ended up pretty much with 4 strikers on the pitch quite a lot of times, 2 of them playing wide. So yeah, I think they beat Sunderland 5-2 here, and it's similar sort of system to what you guys play, 4-2-3-1 that day, 2 holders, and then the 4 in front of them were pretty much given free roam that day. Waghorn played wide right, despite being bought as a number 9. Garner's the kind of physical focal point up front, even though he's not the biggest. McGoldrick is very much the man in form at the moment. As you probably remember, 2-3 years ago was absolutely talismanic figure on his day. I think he's up there in terms of the best in the Championship. If he had an extra yard of pace, he'd be a Premier League player, no doubt. He's put 2 years of horrible injury problems behind him and looks to be really back at it at the moment. So he's the key man. I know we've spoken about Garner. And then it depends who else he plays. They've got a guy on loan from Manchester City, Bersant Salina, young player, Kosovan international. That's got
smiling, doesn't he, for Olicans?
Yeah, he's had a bit of a sort of the moody shirt pick when he signed and all the rest of it. But spoke well when we've spoken to him. Doesn't lack for confidence. I think he's not too happy that he's not played as much as he has done so far. But he's a box of tricks. He's got all the step overs. He takes people on. So if he unleashes that front 4. They've got firepower, and it's interesting because in the past we've talked about Ipswich being the side that grind things out and don't get many goals, and now we're talking about Norwich. Only conceded 3 in the last 8 and unbeaten, but the build-up play is pretty slow from what you've been saying, and not quite. I wouldn't go as far as saying roles reversed, but certainly I don't think we've got one mega footballing side against sort of anti-football merchants. Certainly,
well, there won't be too many diagonal balls into the box from Norwich, I'd say. But I mean, Norwich will kind of match them up, you imagine, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, although it is a concern now, and when we saw that Saturday against Hull, that without Tete, that central midfield element, yes, okay, you need to get it on the floor and try and play, and Norwich have technically good players, but you need to get hold of the ball first. And I think if Ipswich dominate in that area of the pitch, then from what Stuart's saying there, that further forward that they've got lads who could hurt Norwich. So I think that, to me, is the key area, and without Tete, that is a cause for concern, really, because they haven't got a like for like. Harrison Reed, the lad they brought in on loan from Southampton, is a very good technical player, but you can see his stature wise he's not really, he's not going to be knocking players out of the way. So, and Tribal's in the same mode, but yeah, I don't see Norwich veering too far from 4-2-3-1, because that, as we said in an earlier chat, has really been the catalyst. That change in system, and allied to Alex Tete coming back into that system, has really been the foundation now for this 8-match unbeaten run. So I don't see any way Norwich won't come here and set up in that manner.
Okay, well, I think Facebook has decided that having comments and live coverage would be too much of a risk, so sorry about that. But we did try 3 times. I guess the only question for you two gents is predictions. I don't have to do it because I'm neutral and a guest.
Yeah, I hadn't really sort of settled on a final prediction really for
It's Monday
for
as well, isn't
it?
Yeah,
it's early days. I mean, we still don't know obviously what injury news and whatnot will be. I'm gonna be positive. I'm gonna go for an Ipswich win, and in the past, I'm not saying this just because we're stood here and I'm the Ipswich Town reporter. I've predicted draws and defeats in the past for this game, but as we've alluded to earlier, I think they've got their best chance in a long time. I'll go for a 2-1 win.
Paddy, your turn.
Well, there's no way I can forecast a home win. Obviously, it goes without saying. You know, not that. Even though I do think they've got an excellent chance of maybe finally ending that run, but I'm just seeing from Norwich a really resolute group of players who, as perfectly demonstrated on Saturday, 96 minutes, never know when they're beaten now. So much confidence that's going to breed and togetherness and fighting spirit and camaraderie. They'll be under pressure here, but I think it'll be 9 unbeaten come Sunday, possibly a draw, 1-1, 2-2.
There we go. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Thanks all for watching. Don't forget, be it the East Anglian Daily Times, Eastern Daily Press, PinkUn.com, wherever you see it. We'll have the best build-up, live coverage and reaction after Sunday's East Anglian derby. It's always fun, isn't it? Until next time we see you, a very goodbye.